it worked.
Yeah, hi there.
How are you?
Good. How are you? We're live now.
We are. Well, it's nice
Yeah,
that we get to do this, and you're a former Winnipegger, and I'm in Winnipeg, so it's beautiful.
exactly. To everybody watching us right now, hello and Jayanu. My name is Dr. Mandeep Mahal, and I'm on behalf of Punjabi Kids Health. Today we're chatting with Nita Sharda, who's a dietitian in my hometown, Winnipeg, Manitoba. She is also the founder of Happy Healthy Eaters and is kind of a guru in child-led weaning and child-led eating and all of that stuff. So
Mhm.
welcome, Nita.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so humbled, and I think the work that sort of the group at Punjabi Kids Health is, the work that you're doing is beautiful, and I in so many ways wish my parents had access to this, 20, 30 years ago.
Absolutely. So to start with, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your training, and sort of what you do?
Yeah, for sure. एंड पहला मैं कहना चाहनी कि मेरी पंजाबी कुछ इतनी बढ़िया नहीं है सो मेरा मजाक मत उड़ाइयो बट मैं थोड़ा बहुत कोशिश करूंगी एंड आई एम अ रजिस्टर्ड डाइटिशियन मेरी पूरी ट्रेनिंग इत्थे विनीपेग हो चुकी एंड मैं विनीपेग ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ born ਹੋਈ ਸੀ so my roots are really strong in Winnipeg and काम दे बारे में कोई different चीज़ां करदी हैं but मैं private practice का काम करती हैं so that's really nice. I get to see lots of different patients, lots of desi patients actually, and I do lots of counseling in different areas. So with adults for chronic conditions, but also children for picky eating. And then पिछले 10 साल मैं senior homes ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ काम करती ਹਾਂ so that's really special to be able to work with folks at the end of life and ਜਦੋਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ so ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਦੋ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਆ ਇੱਕ 4 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ 2 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ solid food introduced kardi si I felt really lost and I did go to a sort of a public program in Winnipeg and it was great, the information was wonderful, but I still didn't know how to come home and feed my desi baby desi food and I love desi food so I decided to kind of do my own research, look into different eating trends with babies and what we know about the past and what's sort of happening right now. And then with my business partner at Happy Healthy Eaters, Jessica, we created Happy Healthy Eaters, and it's a really beautiful community of parents who are really interested in how to feed their babies. So that is kind of a newer venture, but something that I'm so proud of and passionate about.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I know I have lots of friends that have taken your classes and have
Oh,
found it wonderful.
wonderful.
So ਨੀਨਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋਗੇ ਵੀ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਹੁਣ 18 ਮਹੀਨਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਦਾ ਪੈਂਡੈਮਿਕ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ how do you feel the pandemic has affected the eating patterns of different families?
Yeah, I think that it really depends on each family and what life stage each family is. I've done a little bit of research on sort of the consumer trend side of things, and we know that people are like buying more flour, they're buying more oil and more butter. So we know people are baking more, and we also know that people are in their kitchen a lot more. And I don't know if some of that has fizzled off as the sort of pandemic has progressed, but certainly like this time last year, people were just excited in some ways to just be at home. They didn't have as many extracurriculars with the kids, so dinners weren't as rushed. And I think for some families there were more family meals as well because everyone was kind of at home. And to that, I mean, there's pros and cons to that as well. I mean, when you're home together and if you don't have a lot of food skills, that can be really challenging. But I think that for a lot of families, in some ways it may have been really nice for them to have that downtime to be in the kitchen and make family meals.
Yeah. Do you find ਵੀ ਕਈ ਫੈਮਲੀਆਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਦਿਨ ਘਰ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ?
ਹਾਂ yeah, like ਜਦੋਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਘਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਬੜਾ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਨਹੀਂ then ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ tendency ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੋ, then 1 ਘੰਟੇ later ਉਹ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਖਾਣ ਲਈ ਦੋ, and ਉਹ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਸਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ, but the structure is important because ਜੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਦਿਨ ਗ੍ਰੇਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ meals ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਾਂਦੇ.
So after so long, now kids are back in school, right? And that poses this new challenge where now they've got structure again. So what is your approach to transitioning kids back to school and back to this structured meal times?
I think like it's important for us to have breaks for parents in between meals. So ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਕਦੀ ਵਾਰੀ 2 ਤੇ 3 ਘੰਟੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੁਝ ਖਾਣ ਲਈ ਨਾ ਦੋ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ, ਫਿਰ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦਾ appetite ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ appetite ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਆ if we want our kids to eat. If we don't have appetite, then it's hard for them to come to the table and eat. So just slowly introducing a flexible schedule can be helpful. And I know for my kids, a visual schedule works really well. So I have like pictures on my wall kind of over there. And that works really, really well. For other kids, that can kind of read time, communicating that to them, and maybe even writing it out can be helpful. But I think, in general, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ September, it's a big time of the year, but for adults, September ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਿਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ because summer ਇੰਨਾ busy ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, and then all of a sudden you're back in work mode and having to reestablish a new structure.
Yeah. And so then for your kids, what did you do to sort of bring back that routine slowly before school started?
Yeah. Admittedly, like we had a pretty good structure over the summer. I think and that's something that I value because I see having those boundaries really important. But some language that can be helpful, and I'll do it in English and Punjabi, is like I'll tell the kids like, okay, this is like meal time, and then the kitchen is closed. So hun khan da time a te baad chon mama ne kitchen nu band kar dena. ਜਿੰਨਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖਾਣਾ ਆ ਹੁਣੇ ਖਾ ਲਓ, but ਫਿਰ ਮੰਮਾ ਨੇ ਕਿਚਨ ਨੂੰ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ, okay? ਫਿਰ next time ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖਾਓਗੇ lunch ਦਾ time ਹੋਗਾ. And so just letting them know when they'll expect the next meal, but making it very clear that that it's done. Like you've had your opportunity, eat as much or as little as you want, and then I'm gonna close the kitchen. And I find that phrase really, really helpful. I'm just going to close the kitchen.
Yeah. And it's a phrase that kids understand, right? That's really nice, yeah.
Yeah. They main bas lighta nu band kar deni. That's it.
I like that. It's very clever. The kitchen is closed.
Yeah, like mere ghar ch koi parde nahi hai or anything like that. No walls even, but I just turned lights off and they kind of have a bit of an idea that like the kitchen is closed.
Amazing. And then what has been your approach in terms of packing school lunches? So how do you in general advise parents to pack school lunches?
Yeah, I think school lunches, like you start off like really high in September, like you're so excited, you've got all this new food, these new snacks and new lunch gear, and then like 2 weeks in, like it's like, okay, this is like kind of getting a little redundant. So I think definitely having involvement from ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਬੰਦੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, like ਜੇ ਮੰਮੀ ਡੈਡੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਆਪਣਾ partner, ਤੇ ਬੱਚੇ, if at about 7-8 years of age, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਕਿ ਚਲੋ ਆਪਣਾ lunch pack ਕਰੀਏ. And ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਵੀ ਬੜੀ important ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ because ਇਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ like it gives them a sense of autonomy. And ਤੁਸੀਂ COVID ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ, so because of COVID, kids are lacking that sense of like control. So if you can give them some control with even just reasonable choices at lunch and helping them, that can be really helpful for like a life skill, but also maybe even trying new food.
Right. Okay. And then when you're deciding what to pack for lunch, so say like I need to pack a lunch for my kid, what is the approach that you would tell me? So what do I pack? How much do I put in?
Yeah, for sure. I tried to rehearse this part in Punjabi, so it'll be hard, but I'm probably going to do it mostly in English. I think I think every family, depending on where you also live and what kind of access you have to food, it's going to kind of vary from family to family. And I also realize some schools have different like rules and protocols around the way that lunch is packaged because of COVID. But for me, I kind of look for, am I giving my kids some fat? So fat is really important for kids, for brain development, but also fat खा के फिर ज़्यादा भूख नहीं लगती. So that's important. And then I look for fiber. So fiber अपने ਢਿੱਡ ਤੇ digestive system ਲਈ ਵਧੀਆ ਹੁੰਦਾ. But ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ feeling ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ I'm full for a lot longer with fiber. And then protein. And usually your protein source may, for the most part, it'll offer you iron. So that's how I tend to assess it. But for other families, they kind of like to do the food group system. So, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਵੀ carbohydrates ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ protein, ਦਾਲਾਂ, meat, ਵਗੈਰਾ, dairy ਜਾਂ ਦੁੱਧ ਦੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ, full, and then ਸਬਜ਼ੀਆਂ. So ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਸੋਚ ਸਕਦੇ.
Okay. And then how do you make it so that it doesn't get boring packing lunches, right? You can't give your kid the same thing every day. So how do you add that variety?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the way that I usually do structured in my own family is like we'll do a couple sandwiches, a couple noodle dishes, and then I always have at least once a week I make gilli sabji, so like matar paneer, ja dal hogi, chole hoge, and I kind of have a system in my head that way. ਨਾਲੇ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ leftovers ਵੀ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੰਦੀ because ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਕੂਲ ਆ ਉਹ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਖਾਣਾ ਗਰਮ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ. ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੱਕੀ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਕੂਲ ਇਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਬਟ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਕਈਆਂ ਲੋਕੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ.
Yeah. Okay. And then how do you approach packing snacks versus packing lunch?
Yeah. So for snacks, I mean, I think I'm in this phase of parenthood where my kids think that a snack is like kind of like a crinkly like packaged food. So what I tend to do is I'll just offer them this box. So this is just a box that I keep in my pantry, and it's actually clear. Might be helpful for some families. I get it from the dollar store, and it just has a variety of different types of bars. And some are a little bit more quote unquote nutritious than the others, but really like I leave it up to my kids to decide which one they want on that day. Then they have another bin that they can choose from, and they can have this as a part of their meal or their snack. And it's just different types of fruit that are non-perishable that they can take. And what I like about this is it's a really great budget-friendly option, but also it's a great way for my kids to like enjoy mango year round, which we don't have access to where I live. But I know for those people that are in Pakistan or India, you might have mango year round. And so I'll put things into kind of containers like this, and they can either help themselves. But my general rule of thumb for a snack is to offer at least 2 food groups.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So some other examples could be like tusi anda nu hard boil karta the paneer bhejta. That's a great snack. ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ fruit ਦੇਤਾ ਤੇ ਥੋੜੀਆਂ ਬਹੁਤੀਆਂ pumpkin seeds. So that's another great snack. It doesn't necessarily have to be a food that's in a package. It could also be fresh.
Right. Okay. And then do you tell your kids like I want you to eat this snack in the morning and then lunch and then this snack?
No.
Or do you? Yeah.
No. I think for me, like I just trust them so much, and that is really challenging for a lot of parents. But I just trust them to kind of like navigate through. And the teacher has told me, like especially with Laksh, he's in Montessori, so it's a bit of a different structure for him. But he'll get really like excited about the different snacks and eat that first. But he's learning now how to kind of ration things for the rest of the day. I think it takes kids making these mistakes to like, and they're not really even mistakes, but just to like figure out their own groove. but I pack enough food for the day, and sometimes it comes back completely empty, and I wonder if I sent enough. And then other days, I'm like, did you eat anything?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. This is my 4-year-old dog has decided to join us. This is Olive.
Okay.
So we've had one of our guests has asked us, do you have any ideas for sandwiches?
Yeah, you could keep it as simple. I want to be really mindful of folks' budget and access to food, and so it could be really simple. Some days with just a slice of cheese or paneer, but other days you could even put subji in it. So I know growing up for me, I love having pressed sandwiches, and my mom would press the night before, and it had aloo gobi in it, and I've made it for my kids as well. You could also, even on Monday, I made a chickpea filling. I mashed it up and put that in there. And sometimes, to be honest, we also will just do like jam or butter and honey. And um, it's really important to kind of do some sandwiches that you know are going to be successful for your child, because then they feel successful, but also you as a parent feel really good because they're going to eat it. And then you could offer them, another food that maybe they're learning to like adding in some edamame beans on the side or some peas.
Right, okay. Okay.
Another tip is when you're offering sandwiches, if you have a fairly young eater, is like cut it into triangles, because those little angles make it a little easier to bite into versus if it's just cut in half.
That makes sense, yeah. And I know, it was easier when we were younger, right? I think I grew up on peanut butter and jelly for half a year, where that's all I wanted to eat. But now there are a lot more restrictions in terms of what we can send to for kids in terms of allergies and things like that. So
Yeah.
definitely getting creative is important.
Yeah, so I'll mention then, if anyone has a very young child, get them sort of used to the taste of things like wow butter and sun butter. So these are made from sunflower seeds, or they're made from soybean, and they're really, really nutritious as well. But then your kiddo is used to that taste, and they're not like, where'd my peanut butter go?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then how do you work vegetables into lunches and snacks?
I find for me, I send it separately, but also sometimes it's also in like the subji that I'm sending, or the entree. So if I'm sending pasta with marinara, it would have the vegetables in it. But we almost always try to serve a vegetable. So I kind of put together like a sample lunch, and this is this is something I will send them. So this is just tofu subji, and there's carrots and peas and onion in here already. But then I do have, can you see it, Lindsay?
I can see it, yeah, I can see that.
And there's cucumber, and then I have their 2 fruit. They're getting like a little bun with cheese in there, and then I will give them another dairy option. So maybe like a little bit of dud or some dahi as well.
And then, so you mentioned that, you sometimes will put foods that they're learning to like, and then often foods that that they like. So how do you find that balance between foods that that they're definitely going to eat and foods that they may or may not eat?
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you have a kiddo that really shuts down when they see food they don't like, because we have to remember that for a lot of children, it's actual it's fear around food. Even though it's not danger, it's fear. So you don't want to go overboard and give them like 50% of the stuff are learning to like. I think it's important to offer them some, maybe 2 safe foods at school, so they have the energy that they need to do their work and to learn and to be engaged. So I usually will send. Well, sometimes there's no challenging food, but I do try to serve them things like chickpeas or black beans, things that they once really enjoyed and no longer, care for anymore. And I'm okay with the fact that they don't try it, but sometimes they actually will. And I think it's seeing other children, ਜਦੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੂਜਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਖਾਣੇ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਵੀ ਮਨ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ try ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੀ. And so I think that I try to sort of like play on that, but also still keep it fairly safe for them, because I want them to enjoy their lunch.
Yeah. And then, one of our viewers asked, if they offer a snack, like one of those crinkly items, and they offer a vegetable, oftentimes it's the snack that's eaten, right? And the vegetable is left behind. So do you have any advice for parents on how to tackle that? Kind of
Yeah,
that veggie aversion.
yeah, I mean, I have two suggestions. The first is
Hmm.
you don't like maybe take the granola bar for example. So
Hmm.
let's say you were giving them something like this. Maybe just take this and put it into a container because for children, like the packaging alone makes it so hard to practice intuitive eating. I mean, packaging is very sly and very seductive for adults, never mind like a 5-year-old that's just trying to figure
Yeah.
it out. So take it out of the package. I find that's a really great idea. Even at home, like I would just put the granola bar on a plate with their fruit. The second, suggestion I have is, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I think even for adults, if we have a sweet food there and a vegetable, like we're probably more likely to go for the sweet tasting food, and that's biological. I
Yeah.
think if we can just kind of relax about those things, and in the meantime, if as parents we're eating those vegetables and we're modeling that behavior, our kids will eventually learn to like it. So I also love that phrase. I'm learning to like food. Um,
And then you said intuitive eating. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
yeah, yeah, it's really, really complex. But the idea behind intuitive eating is that children are able to, part of it is that they're able to respond to their own hunger and fullness cues and not necessarily eat in the absence of hunger. I mean, we know that it's okay to eat sometimes when you're not hungry,
Yeah.
um, but also to have a positive relationship with food
Hmm.
where all food is seen as good food. We're not dividing food up in vadiya foods, bad foods or gande foods. It's just looking at all foods as being good foods. And all bodies as good bodies. There's a really big focus on bodies as well and accepting all body sizes.
Okay. So is that the idea that, for a lot of families, dessert is a treat, right? So is it the idea of normalizing that instead of making some foods as treats and some foods as necessary foods?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and like an example is that like je tusi dinner le roti, the dal banai, the salad and dahi. And then ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਜਲੇਬੀ or ਗੁਲਾਬ ਜਾਮਨ or ice cream ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ rest of the meal ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੇ ਦਿਆ ਕਰੋ. You don't have to give it at the end.
Right.
You would give it with the meal. And if your child wants to eat it before, they can eat it before or in the middle or at the end. It's really giving them that opportunity to decide.
Right. To learn the healthy eating.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
like that because, there's certainly still foods that I'm learning how to eat. So
Yeah.
I can appreciate how a 5 or 6-year-old has a lot more foods that they're learning how to eat.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but like I've often gone to a restaurant and had a really great meal
Hmm.
and like I didn't really make a space for dessert and then the dessert menu comes and I'm like, no, I need to have this.
Oh, yeah.
And I have it, but you're way past that point of fullness. But I think we don't live in a society that normalizes having dessert before. But I think had I at least seen the menu or maybe had a couple bites before, I would have left that dinner experience feeling better because I'd practiced that mindfulness and intuitive eating. But it's hard.
No, absolutely. It's happened to me so many times that I now look at the dessert menu before I leave home so that I know I need to leave room for dessert.
That's a great tip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I love my dessert. So can you share some ideas for lunches for school-age children specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, wraps are really great, and you can again put desi sabjiyan in the wraps or um, deli meats with cheeses. I've even done like a banana with seed butter and then rolled it up for my children. We often will also do some type of a noodle dish, whether it's kind of a traditional Italian style pasta or sometimes even Maggi noodles with lots of vegetables we'll send. And other ideas are even you could send kind of make it deconstructed and serve like crackers with cheese and hard-boiled egg and vegetables and fruit and some type of dairy or dairy alternative. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a full-out entree. It could be bits and pieces that, you know, in the end we've got this presentation and it looks really well balanced. I did print out a handout. I don't know how like easy it's gonna be, but sort of that's like the idea that I usually chat about in sessions is having different groups. And I can always send this to you later.
That's amazing. Yeah, and then we can have it available on our page for viewers to see.
Yeah, you could
That
put
would
it
be
in
amazing.
stories and folks
Perfect.
can screenshot.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then how do nutritional needs change as kids get older? So what recommendations do you have for lunches once kids are in middle school and then in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those stages and that age range, calcium is definitely really important. So some great calcium rich food options are, of course, anything made with dud. So dud, paneer, cottage cheese, these foods are really great for calcium, but some other calcium rich foods are also certain tofus that have a lot of calcium in them, beans, and tahini, which is sesame seeds, are really a rich source of calcium. And that's really also important in adolescence. And then I always like to talk a lot about iron, and specifically for women or little young girls when they start menstruating and they get their period. They're, you know, that's a time when they do have more iron loss, and they may also be really into athletics and moving their body a lot. So it's important that they get that iron to prevent deficiency. So foods that are a great source of iron would be ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀਆਂ ਦਾਲਾਂ ਆ, chole, so rongi, rajma, kale chole. There's lots of iron here. And then you might be having fish or different meats in your diet. Those are also going to offer your child some iron. But that is really important. I would, you know, aim to offer at least 2 food sources of iron in a day. And if your child is really learning to like these, then and you're worried about a deficiency, then maybe talking to your pediatrician or a dietitian can be helpful.
Right. Okay. And I know that, you know, for my patients, right, parents often ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਮੇਰਾ teenager ਹੁਣ ਵੱਡਾ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਤੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ food ਨਹੀਂ ਖਾਂਦਾ, or whatever I pack them for lunch, they don't eat it, or they make, you know, they go out to 7-Eleven or Wendy's or wherever and they eat it. So what advice do you give to parents to get their teenagers involved in making healthy choices for lunch?
Yeah, I think I would want to know a little bit more about what's happening at home with the meals, and are parents being, another phrase I use, it like, are you being kind and considerate but not catering? Or are all of the meals like made up of foods that the child really doesn't want to be involved with? Because I think if you made a homemade pizza and you served a big Caesar salad and maybe everyone got like a fizzy drink that day, your child might want to stay home and participate in that. But if it's always like kind of like obscure food that they're not interested in, it's going to be really hard. But I mean, adolescents, just kind of like toddlers, it's just like notoriously erratic and irrational behavior too. But I think a part of that parenting is really reassessing if you need to sort of adjust your own parenting strategy, rather than like having your child, you know, change their behavior all the time. But then also maybe chatting with them about like boundaries around outside food, like giving them enough money so that they can go maybe once or twice a week. I think it really depends on your situation.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I always say, you know, that healthy eating habits don't start in adolescence, right? They start when your kids are 2 or 3 and they're learning how to make food choices. So I love what you said, to give kids autonomy early on, because ਜੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਸਿੱਖਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਅੱਛਾ food ਕਿਵੇਂ pick ਕਰਨਾ, ਫਿਰ ਵੱਡੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ they use those skills. So I really like that.
And you know, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ like mama ਤੇ dads, they go छोटे बच्चे, like, you know, you're tired and you're exhausted, so you don't want to involve your kids in cooking, but it's very important. So ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਟਾ ਨੂੰ ਗੁੰਨਦੇ ਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ like 2 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਬੇਟਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਗੁੰਨ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ. I know when I make roti, like, I mean, it's frustrating, but both of them are there, and I have to give, a peda to Laksh and a peda to Jadiv, and a rolling pin, and there's like atta everywhere, but it's just such a rich experience, so rich.
And it takes a lot of patience, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you need a good vacuum.
Do you have any tips for after school snacks? So you mentioned, a lot of kids, especially as they're getting into middle school and high school, they're doing after school sports or before school sports or after school clubs. So what do you recommend for those kids?
Yeah. I have like one other comment around that is you might actually want to reassess and see if you want to do dinner earlier, because your child might actually might need that much energy.
Right.
So like they might need like the 2 or 3 rotiyan to get them through that activity.
Right.
But sometimes you just don't have that time. But otherwise, again, I would look at offering 2 to 3 food groups. So it could be as simple as like a really high fiber whole grain cereal with fruit, or half of a sandwich, even something really quick digesting like applesauce with some crackers and some cheese might be really helpful. I think it depends on how like the time you eat and the time of the activity. You don't want your child to be too full that they're like not feeling well during the activity. But if you have some time, then you could offer a meal or kind of a mini meal, and then your expectation is like after the activity they just might not be as hungry but just need a smaller snack.
Right. Okay. And then it sounds like a lot of what you're advising is protein rich meals.
Protein rich and some carbohydrates for that quick energy for whatever activity it is. Yeah. I know we're in this weird phase. My son just started Bhangra lessons, and like we had to be there at 6 p.m., which means we have to leave at 5:30, and I don't have like a big window there, so I'm just like trying to find our own rhythm. And you're gonna make mistakes and kind of mess things up, but this is not irreversible, right? So just go with the ebb and flow and see how things go.
Yeah. And then, I mean, logistically, right? Like you run a business, you're a busy mom of 2. Like a lot of my patients, their parents say is like, we don't have time. We don't have time to pack lunches. We don't have time to do all this. So in terms of meal prep for the week and preparing and all of that, what advice do you give?
Yeah, I want to just validate that, it is a big commitment and it is a big job. And I think sometimes it might mean that as parents, we need to lower our expectations for these busy seasons and maybe lean into some more kind of convenience items. And I know people have mixed feelings about that, but convenience items have really changed since you and I, were teenagers. We've got lots of different options that are actually quite nutritious. So things like, meatballs that are like already ready to go and they're quite lean. You just need to kind of reheat them and offer them to your child alongside other items. But in terms of, meal preparation, I think that it's important, maybe with your child, if they're old enough, is to get a sense of like what they want what you want as a family your week to look like. So for us, I tend to do that on Thursday. So that way I have everything I need for Friday, and then on the weekend we kind of do a little bit of preparation between the 2 days. I think a lot of families are exhausted because they save all of that for the weekend, the meal planning, the shopping, and the prepping. So your whole weekend is kind of preoccupied by this, and then it makes it so much less enjoyable. Another way that you could think of it is, I'm going to make a gilli sabji and a sukhi sabji, and I'm going to kind of start there, and then that'll give you a little bit for at least the first couple days of the week.
And then do you recommend, so you mentioned that you give leftovers for lunch. Is that something that you recommend?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I know like my mom kind of thought it was like, thinks it's odd to like reheat foods on day 2 or day 3, but it's absolutely fine as long as you are you have, you know, you're keeping things at a safe temperature. I think it's fine, and as long as your kids are responding well to it as well. I wouldn't survive without like parenthood without like leftovers.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And you know, and I've heard the same, right? Where parents say, "We, oh, you know, agle din fir ohi food khana," or you know, my kids won't eat the same thing the next day, or they won't do that. So, how did you get your kids to be? It sounds like to be not picky eaters about those things.
I think you know a ਗੱਲ you know ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਖਿਲਾਇਆ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ made a really big impact. So ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਸੀ ਖਾਣਾ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਨਾਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ like western dishes ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਖਿਲਾਇਆ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ. And even when they don't like something, like they reject things all the time, but then they re-accept them, and it's so important to kind of continue to repeat neutral exposure. I talk a lot about that, like repeat neutral exposure. We hear a lot about, oh, it takes 10 times or 15 times. I mean, it could take some children up to 20 or 30 times to be exposed to a particular food before they're ready to eat it again. But also, I think I follow the division of responsibility. I don't know if you want me to kind of go into that.
No, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I don't think a lot of Desi people are not enough know about it, but the division of responsibility, you can also Google it. You'll see lots of research and evidence around it, but the division of responsibility really identifies the parent's job and the child's job in feeding. So the parents are responsible for, you know, ki khilana, so the what, when, kado khana dena, and where, kithe apane khana. So what, when, and where is the parent's job, and then the child's job is to decide, you know, if they're going to eat and how much. So je ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਖਾਣਾ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਖਾਣਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦਾ job ਆ. This is their responsibility. And it's important that the two not interfere. Right. So, I mean, my kids are really young, but I never ask them like, oh, like, what do you want to eat for dinner? Like they really don't have that conceptual ability right now. Their brain is just too immature to be able to answer that.
And I like that, and you know, and that's what the Canadian Pediatric Society says as well, is that as the parent, right, it's your responsibility to offer healthy, nutritious food, and it's the child's responsibility to choose what they eat. So I love it's that similar concept. What I often have patients say is, you know, well, my kid won't eat, right? So it's hard for them as a parent to sit there and watch their child not eat. What advice do you give those parents?
Yeah, you know, if you feel like you're doing a good job of the what in terms of offering food that's kind and considerate and you're not catering too much, then I would also want to look at the environment. You know, what are their distractions? A lot of children maybe like in a really long drive and then they get home and it's time to eat. Like they need to get their wiggles out. So sometimes while I'm prepping dinner, my husband will have like a sort of an obstacle course set up for my kids so they can like sit and eat. But I'd also kind of want to look at, you know, what does the rest of the day look like? Are we just focusing on one meal? Parents have really high expectations for dinner. And unfortunately, kids are like, they're tapping out at that time of the day. They're ready to kind of check out and they're ready to go to bed. So often it's the meal that they perform sort of, you know, I don't want to say like the poorest, but they're just not as interested in eating it simply because they're tired, and maybe they've met their nutritional adequacy, you know, earlier on in the day.
Okay. And then what about you know, the kids that don't eat their lunch? Right?
Yeah.
That day after day bring their lunch home. And so my approach to that is, you know, why is your child not eating? Are they not eating because they just want to go outside and play, because you're not giving them food that they like? But what is your approach to that?
Yeah, I think it would be similar. I'd also want to learn more about the child, you know, kisse baare udasa or Do they have some anxiety around eating with other kids, or is there something else kind of going on? Because it's a pretty low pressure environment, you know, to
Right.
kind of eat at school. So I'd probably want to do a little bit of probing. But again, like if your kiddo is going to do really well at breakfast and then the snacks and dinner, and they're growing really well and you have no other concerns, then sometimes it's best to just say, hey, like this is your rhythm right now, and it might change in a couple of months, but I think, yeah, like leaning into trust and just looking at other factors.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Amazing. Well, those are all the questions that I had, and I think I've asked you all the questions that our viewers had. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, you know what? I wanted to just touch on pressure. You know, I think pressure is really common at the dinner table, especially in some Desi families. And I think too, like Desi like moms just want to like feed. You know, I know even for my mom, like whenever we go there, it's just like always around food. But it's important that we try as parents not to have too much pressure at the table. So, you know. चलो एक और बाइट खाओ फिर मम्मा ने कुकी देना मम्मा कुकी दोगी but ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੋ bite low, so this is still pressure, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah.
Or setting up the screen or an iPad. I mean, it's not like you're coercing your child, but they're distracted, they're not engaged in eating actively, right? They're not an active participant.
Right.
But also ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖਾਣਾ ਥਾਲੀ ਤੇ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ then ਕਈ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਇਹ ਵੀ pressure ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, so just plating their food, putting it in front of them is saying like the child interprets this as like, you know, mama put this on my plate, I have to eat it. Oh, that doesn't feel good. And so it's pressure, so you might want to you know, keep the food out family style and let your child start self-serving, and they can do this around 2.5 with some support from you.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
And then,
I love family style.
yeah, family style, that's a great idea.
I grew up going to Mandar, and so like I just remember like the volunteers would like go through when we would have lunch, and like it was all family style. It was great.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I agree with you about that pressure, right? Like even as adults, we feel that pressure to eat at every Indian house that we're at all the time. And it's eating multiple meals all the time. So it's also understanding that each child has a different appetite, has a different desire to eat at that moment, and that can change day to day.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Nita, it's been absolutely amazing chatting with you. You are a wealth of information. To our viewers, if you guys are interested in learning more, please give Happy Healthy Eaters a follow. They share some awesome content and some great ideas on helping you guys figure out how to feed your kids and sort of strategies on how to do that. So thank you so much, Nita, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, I'll see you later. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.